Saudi Arabia is trying to put together an iron coalition against Iran under its domination, its hegemony. I mean, Saudi Arabia's plan is to achieve a sort of hegemony for itself and, by the way, for its Wahhabi or Salafist version of Sunni Islam in the Middle East, directed against Shiism and against Iran. Qatar has, only to some extent, be it said, I mean, the crazy thing is, Qatar, is participating in the campaign, in the Saudi-led campaign against the Shia rebels in Yemen. So it's not as if Qatar has completely broken ranks, but Qatar has been, much more moderate in its approach to Iran, partly because Qatar shares a very important gas field in the Persian undersea gas field with Iran in the Gulf, and so, of course, it simply has to go on dealing with Iran on a daily basis. But this is really an attempt, to whip, by the Saudis, to whip everyone, into line. In addition, there are two other factors. One is that all these states have backed Islamist extremist movements. The Saudis have, the UAE, Dubai, has been the main money laundering center for the Afghan Taliban and many other movements. But Qatar also did support the democratic, or at least semi-democratic, Islamist movement in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood, and protested very strongly when there was the military coup that overthrew them. Now, of course, all the Sunni autocracies in the region see that as a potential threat to them. Quite why Qatar did this is a little bit hard to understand, because Qatar, of course, is also a Sunni autocracy. But anyway, they did, and that has to be punished. But finally, you see, so as part of its anti-Iranian strategy, Saudi Arabia, behind the scenes, has got closer and closer to Israel in recent years. And Qatar has, and that has led to the Saudis withdrawing support for Hamas, which they used to support in Israel. Qatar has gone on supporting Hamas. And it's not that the Saudis care about this particularly, but the Israelis do. And so this is also part of the price of the Israeli-Saudi alliance.
Because the Emir of Qatar was, or the policy of Qatar was a trifle more moderate than the Saudis' policies. They have to be brought into line. That is not a very good prospect for the religious and other political developments in the Middle East.
Well, no, it most certainly is not, especially if you remember for many years that propagandists in America and even some in Europe were saying that the Gulf Cooperation Council was going to become a version of NATO and the European Union in the Arab world and so forth. Haven't heard much of that in the past couple of days.
I see. That Qatar is host to the Al Jazeera media. How long will that go on? Do the Saudis demand that Al Jazeera is turned off?
Well, this is a key question which we don't know, or at least I don't know, because I'm not close to the Saudi royal family. Just how much do the Saudis want? Will they accept a qualified, veiled climb down? In other words, a promise to muzzle Al Jazeera, the removal of a few journalists, or do they want Al Jazeera shut? That would be a terrible humiliation for Qatar. Do they want Qatar to make some kind of strong statement against Iran, or do they want Qatar to break off diplomatic relations with Iran? And the biggest question of all is, are they prepared to see the present emir do this, or do they want to force the present emir of Qatar to abdicate? Because if it's the former things, I think Qatar, given the pressure on it, will have to bow. If it's the latter set of things, it would be so humiliating that it would undermine the legitimacy of the Al Thani dynasty in Qatar. Then I think Qatar would have to resist, and then it becomes a question of how far will the United States allow Saudi to go. Well, of course, a year ago, one would have said, no, I mean, America will step in and rein in the Saudi.
They have a big military installation in Qatar.
Yeah, but of course, under Trump, one doesn't know. And then, there is a lot of pressure in Washington, once again, in part from the Israelis, to move the base. Now, if the base is moved from Qatar, then I think Saudi Arabia will have a completely green light. But that's not happening yet.
Yeah. You think they will annex Qatar?
If the base is moved, my family is leaving as quickly as possible, and I think an awful lot of expats would get out. As a former journalist, I will stick around to see what happens, but I'm not having my children there.
Thank you very much.